Welcome to another episode of Discograffiti's wildly in-depth Beach Boys series and Your Dreams Come True, where Brian Wilson freaks like you and me get our chance to delve deep into the barely believable history and prodigious discography of my favorite band of all time, and also coincidentally the best, along with a slew of over 50 top-shelf guests, ranging from musicians inspired by their work, family members, documentary directors, songwriting collaborators, Beach Boys authors, producers, touring band members, and for good measure, some of the Beach Boys themselves. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow, and special thanks goes out to co-producers Chuck Granata, Dennis Dyken, and Mark Freed, without whom this series would not have happened. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds. The next entry in the Chuck Granata Pet Sounds interview series is from Chuck's dizzyingly inspired chat with legendary producer Mark Linett, the producer and audio engineer best known for his remixing and remastering of the Beach Boys catalog. Since 1988, he's been the engineer of choice for Brian Wilson's recordings. In 1996, Mark created the first true stereo mix of Pet Sounds. He's also co-produced nearly all of the band's archival releases, including 1997's The Pet Sounds Sessions, 1998's Endless Harmony soundtrack, 2003's Hawthorne, California, and 2011's The Smile Sessions, as well as 2021's Feel Flows box set and 2022's Sail on Sailor box set. In addition to earning 3 Grammy Awards, he was nominated for Best Engineered Album for his work on 2004's Brian Wilson Presents Smile. He's also worked with Red Hot Chili Peppers, Jane's Addiction, Los Lobos, Rickie Lee Jones, and Randy Newman. This is Chuck's lengthy and consistently fascinating interview with Mark from the early 2000s for his Pet Sounds book. Stay tuned for my own more recent interview, which covers completely different territory. Here he is then, Mark Linett.
I'll tell you the best thing Chuck Britt's ever said to me. I asked him once, I met him a few times and when he was working at Hanna-Barbera in the tape copy room, for God's sake. And I asked him one point, I said, Chuck, why'd you stop making records in the 70s or whenever he quit? And he said, Mark, I couldn't stand all that overdubbing. This is a guy who grew up, or, his career, you cut a whole album in an afternoon.
Right, you cut live to 3-track or 2-track.
I mean, even the way Brian worked was too much for him, but of course it got much, much worse after that.
Sure.
When 8-track came in, and, and I remember I was doing a Jefferson Airplane box set at one point, and what's his name, Maurice, the guy that, did a lot of their stuff, said, oh yeah, when 16-track came along, Paul Cantor came in one day and said he wanted to use 1 track for each string on his guitar.
Oh my God!
We couldn't do it, but
you couldn't do it, right?
That started, people started thinking about.
Right, right. The fact that they thought about it is really scary.
Well, yeah, exactly. So yeah, this is kind of, and Lee Hirschberg tells me that the day when Hal Blaine showed up with his this huge drum kit with 7 tom-toms, and they all went, oh fuck.
Right.
Now we're going to have to put up more mics and have more inputs, and it was just like they could see what was happening.
Right.
That it was getting away from the kind of records that they that were basically performance records.
Right.
To that point. Sinatra, as I understand it, hated to overdub and would almost always refuse to do it.
Yes, that's absolutely true. I mean, there were some instances at Reprise when he did do some overdubbing, but by and large, he just wanted to cut live with the studio in the band
as well. He wanted to perform.
Yeah, he wanted to be standing with the band in the studio and just cut right direct. I mean,
and it shows. I mean, how well it's amazing how well it worked. But
well, those things are amazing. I think a lot of those Reprise 3 and 4 tracks are just stunning. I believe that the sound does not come across well on the LPs or the CDs in most cases.
It's funny too, because I remember Lee telling me that when 4-track came in, they were like, "Well, what do we do with this 4th track?"
Right.
Because 3-track was easy, stereo band,
right,
and the vocalist in the middle,
right.
And the only reason you did it was so you could, maybe remix it later. But that, that made a lot of sense. 4-track, it was like, what do we do with this track?
Right.
So it's funny when you get up ones that are 4-track, and it's like, like Summer Wind or whatever, the organs on it or something. It's like
right.
they're trying to find something, and of course for pop records, if you had a background vocal group, which Sinatra never did, that was a good place to put them. But
yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, so you see, like on Nancy sessions, you'll see that.
Right.
It'll be left, right band, her, and the vocal group, and that'll be the 4 tracks.
And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and her stuff is cut the same way. I mean, I've heard the session for Boots,
right?
And it's just, it's the record minus her.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we got to stick to Pet Sounds.
So, all right. So now, anything else you think is important to add about this whole process? How about the bouncing? Let's talk a little bit about bouncing in cell sync, like how that worked, how it worked on those tapes, what you're finding.
Well, it seems to work just fine. I mean, the 8-track, the 8-track definitely has sonic deficiencies compared to the 3 and 4 tracks, just overall. I mean, for one thing, for example, if you ever noticed on the original mono of "Waiting for the Day," if you listen really close to the original, you can hear drums that aren't supposed to be there because the tape they used apparently was used tape, had been used for something else, and there's some rock and roll band bleeding through on that song.
Wow.
Now we eliminate that, of course, when we go back to the original, but it's like the talking. It's like the talking in here today that, of course, annoys 10 people that we when we take it out. Now,
what does that talk? I mean, is that talking just was bleed over from?
No, it's like, well, here today it's during the solo.
Right.
And, they're not going to stop and punch out, so frankly, I think Pet Sounds was mixed kind of sloppy. There is a school of thought that says Brian was discouraged by the way it was going and did the mixes very quickly and didn't take a lot of care because he was frustrated. And so there are a number of places where you hear stuff that was on the 8-track. If you look at the track sheet, for example, here I'm looking at let's see, there's 2 for just, well, it says just wasn't made for these times. Track 7, vocal group number 2, and there's a note that says might have to key out, which means might have to switch it off in places. Or here we go, God only knows, Carl lead number 2 on track 5. I don't even know what this means. It says kill before VG comes in. Oh, before vocal group comes in. That's what it means. He goes at the end of the second verse, during the dot 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 dot, Carl goes, better?
Right, he goes, that better? Right.
Exactly. Things like that.
I notice, the big thing I notice that's right up front is in the mono mix of Wouldn't It Be Nice, there's like that edit.
Yeah, well, that's the edit, taking an older mix with Mike singing and putting it in the bridge.
Right.
I didn't figure that out for years because the mono mix of that song, that's another thing. Capitol had this ridiculous habit of, they have these things called, all labels do, called phonoreels.
Right, for the singles.
And what they used to do was that they would take the single cuts off of albums and put them on these phonoreels and then put a copy back on the album.
Right.
And in the case of Wouldn't It Be Nice, somebody didn't write it down. So somewhere hiding on some phonoreel somewhere is the original mono copy, I assume, unless it was copied. The other possibility, of course, is that it was copied because the tape broke or, whatever.
No, I think you're probably right.
Yeah. The assumption is that it was pulled to a phonoreel and not identified. Capitol has the most fucked up library on the face of the earth, and I won't even go into some of the stuff because there's actually possibility of litigation. But let's just say that more stuff has escaped from there than
Right.
It's horrible.
I mean, there's Sinatra stuff that's walked off.
Oh, I'm sure any significant artist you can name, stuff has walked out of there. And of course, nobody cared for years. I mean, when I started on this stuff in 1989 or whatever it was, Capitol didn't even have a tape library. The stuff was like stashed all over town, in the basement of the Pantages Theater, and
right.
Just in piles. I mean, you couldn't find anything.
Right.
But that's
well. So have you guys looked for that phonoreel, or?
Well, we've looked, but I mean, they have 10,000 phonoreels, and there's no telling where it is. And we looked, but it's a very bad system.
Wow, I thought that they would.
I'm much more concerned with why I can't find the masters for Good Vibrations, and why nobody has any recollection of seeing them after 1968. Here's a good question. Why, for example, on Stack of Tracks, is Good Vibrations, the track for that not included? Doesn't that seem like a ridiculous omission?
Right.
I mean, what would have been more obvious? It was just like the biggest friggin' record of their career. Wouldn't you think they would have put that on there? I would, but nope. So I have a feeling that, it wasn't sitting where it could be easily found in 1968 when that record was put together.
Right, that's very possible.
I mean, it was, well, my guess is that it would have been at CBS, as a few other tapes. We did turn up a few tapes at CBS 10 years ago, and it may well have been left there, and it could have gotten scrapped, or destroyed.
All right, that concludes your free sneak peek into today's Patreon episode. If you want to hear the rest of it, just visit patreon.com/discograffiti and either purchase this podcast by itself for $4, or better yet, subscribe at the major tier and get access to Discograffiti's 4 weekly episodes. That's Friday's free episode, the Sunday Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound episode, which showcases Patreon members and the Elephant Six world, your Monday bonus episode, and your Wednesday early release ad-free super extended director's cut of that Friday's show. Please keep in mind this is entirely how I support my wife and 6-year-old son, so don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not supporting Discograffiti. Become a member so you don't miss a single thing at patreon.com/discograffiti.